当時魔界村ではただがむしゃらにやってたけど、難しく考えないで簡単に暮らすのもいいかなって思い始めて、魔界村での戦いは難しすぎましたよ。
Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO. Today we're continuing retrospective of the Arthur Chronicles: A Night to Remember, where we review every single Ghosts and Goblins game in a retrospective fashion and also in a chronological order. And today we're playing Super Ghouls N Ghosts on the Super Nintendo, the fourth game as far as the release schedule goes, and the third game in the mainline franchise. More importantly, the first game to leave the arcades, because even though Ghosts and Goblins and Ghouls and Ghosts is known as an arcade franchise, the large majority of the games are never released on arcade boards. They were for home consoles or handhelds. And when I say Super Ghouls and Ghosts is one of the best, most iconic games on the Super Nintendo, I 100% mean it. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But Super Ghouls and Ghosts is everything that the arcade original as well as the 1988 release is, plus more. And of course, being a home console port, it's the first time you could bring a Ghosts and Goblins game home with you technically. And while this game does suffer for some absolutely massive slowdown, you get used to it and can basically work around it. But I would say that is one of the things that always gets talked about in this game, outside of the difficulty, is the fact that this will absolutely chug frame rate wise, and sometimes that is going to lead to some deaths that shouldn't have actually happened, because you basically ended up lagging the game without realizing it. But this game basically takes the concept of the arcade original and the 1988 release and just expands upon it in every different direction. It is a longer game, it's a more complex game, and it does a lot of stuff for the Super Nintendo hardware that you would never see in the arcade games. And even this first area here with those gigantic waves coming over the top and crashing down, it basically showed you that there's safe places to stand and there's definitely dangerous places to stand, and you needed to navigate this world and basically be careful the entire time. But luckily on the Super Nintendo, the time frame that it gives you is much more generous than the arcade. You start off the rounds with plenty of time to basically allow you to more carefully move throughout the world, because areas like this ground's going to drop out and you need to double jump at the right time while making sure that you don't get too close to the enemy on the right. If you rush through there, you're going to basically be forced to jump to the right into your death, or at least losing Arthur's armor. Because just like every other game in the franchise, you have two and exactly two hits. You have your armor, then you're in your underwear, take another hit, and you are dead. And I love this giant cockatrice enemy here as well. The boss battles in this game are super inventive, and it ties directly back to the first two games. It feels like its own independent release as well. And I think that's why this game really does work. It feels like an expansion of ideas they've already kind of taken a look at in the arcade versions. Then coming to the home console, they can make a bigger, bolder, more experimental game. Because this ghost pirate ship here, I just absolutely love it, and I would say that the Super Nintendo looks spectacular in this series. Sure, on paper the Capcom CPS is definitely a more powerful piece of hardware, but there's something about the Super Nintendo visual look here, the color palette, the sprites, that I think just basically make this game look one of the prettiest games in the franchise. Unfortunately, because they did kind of push on the sprite count and the overall graphical effects, you are going to suffer from that slowdown, but you're going to get some Mode 7 effects in the game as well later on, so I think the trade-off was definitely worth it. And you'll see here as that little ghost, whatever he was, kind of looks like a sperm, floats up towards us. This game is going to be every bit as challenging as the games that preceded it, but I love that. If you haven't noticed already, from the first game to these, you have a double jump now as well, and that's going to be a core mechanic in the game. But of course, when you are jumping, you're basically picking a direction, so you do need to be careful how you use that jump. Time it well and it's basically going to keep you alive. Time it incorrectly and it's going to lead to your death, or at least taking damage. But that is again the risk versus reward nature of something like Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Learn the patterns, learn the levels, understand what's safe and what isn't, and through repetition and sheer learning, you're going to get better at the game. And I love this area here as well, riding this raft down this river, basically with all of this undulating water, all of these fish coming towards you, even some mermen in the background that will jump out. The game is just giving you everything to look at, see, do, and shoot at. And the best part is it's married to a spectacular soundtrack, which I really do think is some of the best music I've ever heard on the Super Nintendo. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, hear what you think, and I'll be back with a lot more of the history of the game and why it is definitely one of the best Super Nintendo titles ever made. Just some of the absolute best music ever to come out of a Super Nintendo in my opinion, and I love the bosses in this game, just like I mentioned that cockatrice at the beginning. They are so inventive. This demon here is basically just a gigantic piece of sea coral. Not sure what's going on with those eyes there and how they grew out, but he can also make basically water tornadoes. You have these little vortexes that he can basically try to sweep you up in, and he's also going to send out these shells that are pointy and are going to destroy you. And I love that you can't stay on one plane in this boss battle. You're constantly floating up and down. You can even go underneath the boss at certain points in time, but there is no safe space. You have to read every single movement and go from there, and that's why you'll see I did bring the bow and arrow in here, because more often than not the boss is above you, and being able to shoot up gives you a much easier battle, and that is going to be something that is super crucial in Super Ghouls N Ghosts, pun very much intended. Your weapon selection. Sometimes having a weapon that shoots up is going to make or break that level. Other times having this weapon is going to be absolutely detrimental to your performance. You basically have to decide what works for you and what you want to carry through each level. And of course, just like every other game in this series, there is more than one loop, so you need to deal with it twice. And you'll see here you can get the upgraded armor now. Holding down the button is going to give you a charge shot, and you can even go with gold armor later on. It is a fun little addition, but of course, just like the base armor, you only get one hit, and trust me, losing that powered up armor is even worse because the weapon's power is going to be so much better on it. And there's definitely a ton of platforming in this game as well, and I love how difficult it is. It's always fair. If you miss a jump, it's because you didn't read it correctly or you weren't paying attention to what was coming next, but it does give you that platforming difficulty from the 16-bit era that pretty much everyone loved. You will see there I hit the edge of that platform because it does have spikes and it did kill me. So there's so many different traps and hazards in this game, so many different double jumps you need to hit perfectly, and so many single jumps as well. When you're playing this game correctly and you are progressing, you feel like you're dominating the game and it can't stop you, but then your friend Red Armor shows up and reminds you that this game is out to kill you and you're gonna die again and again, because his patterns of movement on screen are every bit as chaotic and random as they ever have been, and it is just a reminder that as good as you get at this game, the game has something else up its sleeve and it's totally gonna destroy you with that. But as we move on to this next area, you get some more visual effects in the Super Nintendo than you did in the arcade originals. This tower right here resembles this rotational aspect, and it just works well in the Super Nintendo hardware. There's something about how this moves. Now you feel like you're actually ascending the tower, even though Arthur is basically stationary, and the graphical effect is just kind of rotating that sprite around in the background, or the trickery of doing so. But it is a small visual touch that really makes this game shine. And of course, now you're seeing a little bit of Mode 7 effect as well in the scaling and rotation of this sprite here, and that is a fun look. But pretty much every time Mode 7 comes up, you're gonna have to expect the game to slow down. It never runs at a stable frame rate when it's trying to scale anything, just the same way that a lot of the other Mode 7 games would definitely tank the frame rate. But it is worth it. It seems like the boss fights in areas that do use Mode 7 and do have that slowdown are slightly easier because they knew you weren't getting as much response in the controls as you would have liked. And it's nice the development team kind of pulled off the throttle ever so slightly to ease up on the difficulty when they knew the game was going to slow down. Now that we have the key, we can go to the map screen, which is absolutely iconic, and we can move on to the next level, another one that I love in the game, and we can move on to the next sound sample because I love this track. 30 seconds and I'll be right back. Just more straight up amazing music, and you saw that Mode 7 effect as well when you get trapped in those cages and the screen rotates around. Definitely an area where the game slows down, but there really aren't any enemies in those areas, so it is mostly just a little bit of eye candy to show you what the Super Nintendo could do hardware wise. And even here in this little rotating area, as this platform undulates back and forth and you have what look to be intestines or some sort of stomach underneath you, this is just such a classic look. And jumping here, you have to be perfect or else you are going to die, and I really do love that about the game. perfection is the name of the game, and once you actually learn how to control Arthur, all the intricacies, you're going to have a fun time. And of course we basically get the Hydra here, the three-headed dragon, but it also has a different body, so not quite sure what animal this is supposed to be. I just know it is a fun boss fight, but you will see here absolutely lagging the ever-loving hell out of the game. But that is another area in which having this bow and arrow shooting up was a huge benefit, because I can duck down underneath some shots and basically miss the entirety of the boss's attack. So again, think about your weapons, think about what's available in the game, and think what works the best for the entire playthrough, because even though there are some weapons that are better for certain stages, sometimes you find a weapon that clicks with you basically for the entirety of the run, and at least for me the bow and arrow is that. It is not the perfect weapon, it doesn't do the most damage, but it gives me the most versatility, like areas here with this flower shooting out all of these spore balls. Being able to actually shoot up from this downstairs area is going to make it ever so slightly easier, but trust me, the game is never going to be easy. You just kind of have to find advantages here and there, and as we get further into the game, red armor is going to keep showing up time and time again, so you're definitely going to have to learn his pattern, but trust me, you can learn it, you can kite him, and you can get better at this game all at once. And I love this Ice King battle here as well, a little bit of Game of Thrones vibe long before that would ever actually happen, but it's always what it reminds me of now that I've seen that franchise. But I would say this is one of the easiest bosses in the game. Just stay far enough away from him, jump over a few ice crystals, and it should basically be an easy win. Not sure if they were trying to make this easy just to give you a little bit of a breather, it just happens to be one of those things I click with, but trust me, it is one of the easier boss battles, and you are rewarded for having gotten this far at this point in time. And as we move on to continue to fight other bosses, if you can get the green armor, try to keep it for as long as you can, because now this bow and arrow is a homing shot, so I don't really have to focus on actually aiming whatsoever. But of course, I didn't do everything perfectly, I've lost the armor, so now I am at risk of dying here. But that is really why this game gets under your skin. It's that constant fear. You know you're one hit away from death, and you know you're going to have to go back because you don't respawn where you die. You have to do the level, at least a portion of it, over again, and that really makes you want to be absolutely perfect in every single movement you do. But I'm going to give you one more sound sample because this next track is my favorite in the game, 30 seconds, and I'll come back with more. I just love how the music swells up and gets more dramatic the further we get into the game, and this last level is going to test every last bit of your patience and ability to control Arthur, select your weapons, and stay away from every single bit of danger, because now we're going to basically go through a boss gauntlet. You're going to see more than one boss at the same time, and for the most part it is going to be more difficult, but again, if you can keep the green armor through to the end of the game, it is going to be that much easier, even though it's never going to be easy whatsoever. And as we move on here to the next boss, don't forget that this does have 2 loops in it, like basically every other game in the franchise, so getting to the end and seeing the credit scroll once isn't going to be good enough. You're going to have to go back and do it a second time, and the second loop is going to be that much more difficult. I'm not sure if I love that or hate it. I've only ever completed the first loop on any single game of this title, and that is one of those things. I'd love to do the second loop, but by the time I get to it, I'm so exhausted by beating the first loop, I feel like that's a win enough for me. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, have you ever beaten the first loop in this game? Have you ever beaten the second loop in this game? I would be curious to hear who has done what, because it's one of those titles, it just absolutely will destroy you in new and inventive ways, but you're 100% there for that and you always enjoy it. And now we get to go see the credit scroll and the little bit of the story, and you're basically going to be told you've done a great job, but you need to go back and do it all over again, and you need to find a certain weapon and bring it with you all the way to the end of the game if you actually want to see the true ending. It's a very cruel twist of fate, but it's what the series is known for, and there is some joy in knowing that you're only halfway through. But short of that, we are done, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.